583 people died in 8 seconds. Two Boeing 747 jumbo jets, each weighing more than 300 tons, collided on a runway in the Canary Islands. The impact was so violent that both planes exploded almost instantly, creating a fireball visible from miles away. This was not a terrorist attack. It was not a mechanical failure. It was not simply bad weather. The deadliest aviation accident in history happened because of a chain of human errors, radio confusion, thick fog, and one misunderstood word. March 27, 1977, Tenerife Airport, a disaster that changed aviation forever, yet somehow many people barely know the story. The day began with what seemed like a minor disruption. A bomb exploded at Gran Canaria Airport in Las Palmas, the main airport hub for the Canary Islands. The explosion was not large enough to destroy the airport, but it was enough to shut it down and force incoming flights to divert. Those diverted flights were sent to Tenerife North Airport. Tenerife North was not built for this kind of traffic. It was a small regional airport with one runway designed mostly for local flights and occasional charter aircraft. Suddenly, it had to handle some of the largest passenger planes in the world, all arriving at the same time. KLM Flight 4805 had started its journey in Amsterdam. Captain Jacob Velayson van Zanten was in command. Van Zanten was one of the most respected pilots in the KM fleet. He was not just a captain. He was KM's chief flight instructor, the man responsible for training other pilots on the Boeing 747. His face had appeared in KM safety material and advertisements. If anyone was expected to handle a 747 safely under pressure, it was him. Pan American Flight 1736 had started in Los Angeles, stopped in New York, and was heading to Las Palmas when the diversion order came through. Captain Victor Grubbs was in command of the Pan Am aircraft. He was also an experienced pilot with decades of flying behind him. His first officer was Robert Bragg, and the flight engineer was George Warren. Both crews were skilled. Both aircraft were safe, but they were about to be placed into one of the worst possible airport situations. When both 747s landed at Tenerife North, the problem started immediately. The airport had no ground radar system. That meant air traffic controllers could not see aircraft moving on the ground through radar. They had to rely on radio reports from pilots. The terminal was overwhelmed. Passengers from multiple diverted flights crowded into a space that was never meant to handle thousands of people. The taxiways were packed. Some aircraft had to park in unusual positions. The KLM 747 and the Panama 747 were both stuck in a crowded airport that was not ready for them. Because of the parking situation, both aircraft eventually had to use the runway as part of their taxi route. That detail would become deadly. Hours passed. Gran Canaria remained closed for a time, and the crews waited for KLM Flight 4805. Time was becoming a serious issue. Captain Van Zanten was concerned about duty time rules. If the crew could not leave soon, they might be forced to stay overnight in Tenerife. That would mean delays, passenger problems, paperwork, and major schedule disruption. Van Zanten also decided to refuel the KM aircraft while waiting. That added even more delay and made the aircraft heavier. Meanwhile, everyone at the airport was waiting for a chance to leave. Then the fog rolled in. Tenerife is in the Atlantic Ocean where weather can change quickly. What began as a manageable afternoon turned dangerous when thick fog moved across the airport. Visibility dropped badly. From the control tower, controllers could no longer see the runway clearly. This mattered because the airport still had no ground radar. The controller could not see the aircraft. The pilots could not see far ahead. The entire system now depended on radio communication, and radio communication was about to fail at the worst possible moment. Around 5:00 p.m., both aircraft began taxi procedures. The KM 747 was instructed to taxi down the runway to the far end, turn around, and prepare for takeoff. The Panama 747 was instructed to follow down the same runway and then leave the runway at the third taxiway exit. 75 clear to the PAP maintain flight level 90 flight, and after takeoff proceed with heading 40 until intercepting the 3 to 5 radial from left. But this instruction was confusing. The third taxiway required a very sharp turn. For a fully loaded Boeing 747, that was extremely difficult. The Panama crew questioned the instruction and continued toward the next exit, which was easier to make. At the same time, the KM aircraft reached the far end of the runway and turned around. Now, the KM 747 was facing down the runway, ready to take off. The Panama 747 was still on that same runway, hidden somewhere ahead in the fog. Captain Van Zanten believed the Panama aircraft should have left the runway by now. He could not see it. The tower could not see it. The Panama crew was still trying to find the correct taxiway in heavy fog. Inside the KM cockpit, pressure was rising. The crew wanted to leave. The captain was experienced, confident, and focused on getting airborne. Then came the misunderstanding that changed aviation history. Van Zanten started to push the throttles forward. First Officer Klaus MS stopped him and said they did not yet have air traffic control clearance. Van Zanten pulled the throttles back and told him to ask for clearance. MS radioed the tower and said KM Flight 4805 was ready for takeoff and waiting for air traffic control clearance. Roger Clearac. The controller responded with route clearance. This told the KM crew what to do after takeoff, including the route and altitude, but route clearance is not the same as takeoff clearance. A plane must receive a clear and direct instruction, cleared for takeoff. KLM had not received that. After receiving the route clearance, First Officer MS read it back. Then he added the words, "We are now at takeoff." The controller replied, "Okay, stand by for takeoff, I will call you." But that message was partly blocked by another radio transmission from the Panama crew who were trying to report that they were still on the runway. Because both transmissions overlapped, the KM crew heard interference instead of a clear warning. The KM 747 began accelerating down the runway, passing 80 knots. Stopping became harder every second. Ahead, invisible in the fog, the Panama 747 was still trying to get clear. At about 5:06 p.m., the Panama crew saw landing lights coming toward them. Captain Grubbs pushed the throttles forward, trying to move off the runway as Captain Van Zanten saw them at the last second. Pulling back hard, he tried to lift the KM 747 early, its tail scraping the runway, but it was too late. The aircraft lifted slightly, but its landing gear struck the Panam at over 150 mph. Both planes exploded. The KM crashed back down, killing everyone aboard. The disaster proved expert pilots can make deadly decisions under pressure, and safety systems must be built for the worst day. 583 people died on March 27, 1977, because small failures lined up at once. The deadliest aviation accident became aviation's greatest teacher, and why this story should never be forgotten.